How's it going today, guys? I'm Keegan Denry, and today we're going to be going over a few different techniques for removing the background of an image in Adobe Photoshop CC. In another sense, we're isolating the subject, or foreground. In addition, I'll go over some common problems and good general info about the process. For example, let's start with what makes a good image to be cut out. When selecting an image to cut out, not all are created equal. One thing you'll want to look at is resolution. For example, this photo is 2,600 pixels wide, whereas this one, a simple crop of the prior, is only 440 wide. You'd much rather use this one as it gives Photoshop a lot more information. Another thing to look for is just general sharpness, whether it's because of the camera's focus and the depth of field, or because of motion blur, or a generally grainy image. It'll be harder to cut out the background with fuzzy edges. Photoshop does provide tools for it, but we won't really be exploring those advanced features in this video. Try and find an image as close to sharp-edged as possible. You'll find that with super close-ups, you'll often get some form of blurry edge just due to the shallow depth of field. But this would be a lot better to work with than this. So let's start simple. We have the magic wand tool that is quick and easy to use in certain circumstances. Anything with a fairly solid color, well-defined background warrants a quick try with the magic wand. It works especially well for things like clip art. Simply click on a color and the tool attempts to make a selection of all colors within a certain defined tolerance. This means how far away from the original color you clicked on will Photoshop consider similar. For example, the background of this image isn't a solid purple. There's actually some lighter purple specks throughout. So if we raise our tolerance to something like 32, the default, you can see that clicking on the purple gives us exactly what we wanted. Going over some of these other options, contiguous simply means, as you can see, this area is all selected. But if I were to make a selection with contiguous on, it only goes up until the edges of the selection, things that are linked to where you clicked by color. So let's pop that back off and make sure we have all of our purples selected. Sample all layers does exactly what you think it would do. Let me quickly cut our image in half so that we have two actual layers. If I click on part of this image, it'll only select purples on that layer. However, with sample all layers selected, it'll select all purples from anywhere in your layer hierarchy. Anti-alias, you'll want to almost always keep on. And sample size is an interesting one. Basically, you can either have Photoshop make a selection based on the exact point or pixel you clicked on, or by the weighted average color of a 3x3, 5x5, etc. area around where you click. Lastly, these four options are the same as any selection tool in any Adobe product. With this one selected, whatever you click will just be defined as the new mask. With this one, it'll add to any current mask. This will subtract, and this will only keep the overlay between the first mask and your new selection. So as you can see, we get all of our purples pretty perfectly in a clip art image like this. However, I'm deciding I want to keep the purples in this building. I don't want to treat it as part of the background. So to deal with that, let's first put our layers back together again. Now, to deal with this building, instead of deleting our background, let's press Ctrl-Shift-I, or go up to Select, Inverse. If you're on Mac, it'll show you your keyboard shortcut here. What this does is it switches the selection from the background, which we don't want, to only the things that we do want. It literally just inverts the selection. So now that we have only the stuff we want to keep selected, click on the Layer Mask tool in the bottom right. Let's delete our background real quick here so we can see what we've done. And that looks awesome. The reason we did a clipping mask instead of actually deleting is because it preserves all information instead of actually deleting it. So if we select back on our clipping mask, go to a brush tool, make sure it's set to pure white. A helpful shortcut, by the way, is this arrow, which will switch your foreground and background colors, or by the hotkey X, does the same thing. So when you're working with a layer mask, you're probably only going to be using black and white, so this is super helpful. Let's make sure white is selected, as that is the color for stuff we do want to see. Let's right click with the brush to make sure our hardness is all the way up and the size is where we want it, or you can hit bracket keys to make the brush larger and smaller. And let's just actually paint over the area we want to restore. And just like that, we have our first image cut out. Moving on, hiding underneath the magic wand tool, we have the quick selection tool. These icons basically mean the same as the ones we just looked at for the magic wand tool. This will add to the current selection, and this will subtract from it. With this tool, we actually have brush options, however, as this works a bit differently than the magic wand tool. Let's bring our size up a bit and show you exactly what this tool does. Basically, it's a helpful tool for when the background is multicolored, but is still fairly well defined from the foreground. This is a high resolution in-focus image with clean edges, so it'll do alright except for the hair, but we'll get to that. So if I literally just paint over the area I want to select, Photoshop has a sort of smart algorithm where it tries to guess what you mean, and it does pretty well. Now don't worry if you actually click onto your image a bit. Holding Alt will temporarily put you in the subtract mode, as you can see up in the top left. You can paint over that area you didn't mean to grab, so just hold Alt and click over the parts you don't want. Sometimes it can be helpful to do single clicks in tight corners as opposed to dragging. Now I'm going to use the bracket keys to just make my brush smaller and get right in there. Looks pretty good, but I can tell you right now the hair is going to be a problem. Back on the magic wand tool, and for that matter any selection tool in Photoshop, you may notice this button called Select and Mask. If you come from previous versions of Photoshop, you might actually be mad that you haven't been able to find the Refine Selection option. It's now hiding under Select and Mask. I won't be going over this tab fully in this video, as it definitely warrants its own. However, I can say this is a way to refine and finesse your selection. This tool in particular, edge detection, can be helpful for hair. For now, we'll just bump up the radius on edge detection a little bit. All that does is it looks a certain number of pixels away from your current edge to see if there is a better fit. This helps a lot with hair, though we can see it's definitely not perfect. Zooming in and getting it as close as possible with the quick selection tool, and then further refinement in the select mask option, will be the way to go here. But for time's sake, we'll leave it how it is. Now remember, Control-Shift-I and clipping mask. Even though Photoshop gives you all these powerful smart tools, don't forget that sometimes simplicity is the best answer. If the photo allows for it and has straight edges that are well defined, you can simply use something like the pen tool. With this technique, you just want to zoom in so you can get precise points, and just draw around the part of your image you want to cut out. Some helpful pen shortcuts to know is by holding Control, you move to a selection mode where you can move it around, and holding Alt can help you finesse curves, but we won't be using any. Even though we could have isolated our main building here with our previous selection tools, we would have seen things start to fall apart on this side building where the edges are less defined. This is an example of where the pen tool might be a classier looking solution. Once the path is done, right click within it and make selection. Now since we're using the pen tool, our lines and corners are going to be perfect and rigid. To make this look a little bit less odd, make sure you put on a little bit of feather. Control-Shift-I, create layer mask. It's important to note that for a lot of images, removing the background is going to be best done with a combination of these techniques. Let's do our best to take the blue away from this image. However, I can tell you right now it's already going to be a problem because of the high contrast between blue and red. This is something else to look out for. The lower quality the camera, the more bleeding there will be between the edges of high contrast colors. What this means is there might be some purples that get left over. But let's do our best. For something like this, we could use the quick selection tool, which works fairly well, especially with manual refinement. However, it would be a real pain for the blues down here. So while we could use the magic wand tool, I'll use this as an opportunity to show you one other selection option. We're going to select based on color, which yes is basically what the magic wand tool does, but you just have a little bit more control over it. First, however, I'm going to make a duplicate of this image and hide what we'll call the original. Take our new copy of the image, go to Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and really crank the saturation up. Then go back to Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and really crank the contrast up. If it doesn't do much, you can even use Legacy Contrast, which is just a way stronger version. The reason we're doing this is to better separate the colors, since that's what we're going to be using to make our selection. Now, our image obviously looks a bit different than original, but that's okay. We'll be able to restore it. The color range tool is a very interesting one. Normally, if you click on a certain point in this image, it selects all colors matching that point. However, holding Shift allows you to select a wide range of colors, as our sky is multiple shades of blue. So this might not look perfect, especially around the middle. With the beauty of layer masks, we can get it there. So let's quickly... So I just noticed this already has a layer mask from earlier. I could delete it and click this button again, but with it selected, I can also just go to my black brush tool and paint away everything I don't want. So it's looking pretty good, but let's get a few more of these purples. Zoom in real close to the area you want to be sampling from. And I'm just holding Shift and grabbing a couple different versions of this purple. Now that we have those purples selected, let's make sure we're back on a black brush and paint them away. Now that's looking pretty good. Let's just restore some areas we've lost detail in. Switch our foreground and background so we're back to white. And just draw over any areas that you know should be in the image. Now just a little bit more cleanup. So as you can see, here's an awesome example of using all of the tools at your disposal to their own personal best advantage. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys found something helpful in this video, and we'll see you next time.